Hey everyone, All in Arrowhead here. Week 14 didn't just shake the standings. It told us exactly which teams are gearing up for a real postseason run and which ones are starting to wobble at the worst possible time. We had statement wins all over the league, starting with the Rams exploding offensively in their blowout over Arizona, where they completely dictated tempo and looked every bit like a team rounding into form. Detroit answered with their own fireworks in their win over Dallas, showing they can still trade punches with anybody when Jared Goff is in rhythm and the run game controls early downs. Green Bay kept their divisional stranglehold intact by grinding out a tough, methodical victory over Chicago, leaning on situational execution late, while Denver held off a Raiders team that tried to hang around far longer than expected. The Broncos' defense bending but refusing to break in the fourth quarter. Even outside those games, you saw teams like the Chiefs claw their way through a trap spot but still not escaping, and the Texans remind everyone that their young core is developing faster than anyone expected. It was one of those weeks where nearly every matchup felt revealing. Defenses tightening in the red zone, quarterbacks playing some of their smartest situational football of the year, and contenders showing they can win in multiple ways as the temperature drops. Now, with every team having had their bye and the league perfectly synced up in terms of games played, Week 15 pushes us to the true final stretch, where urgency becomes the default setting and nothing comes easy. This is the point in the season where playoff-caliber teams show their layers. The ones that can stack stops when their offense stalls, the ones that can adjust on the fly when their scripted plays get taken away, and the ones that can finish close games instead of letting them slip. Over the next couple of weeks, we're going to see divisions potentially decided, wildcard races tighten to single possessions, and multiple playoff berths get clinched as the league tilts toward its January shape. Teams that looked explosive in Week 14 will try to prove it wasn't a one-off. Teams that barely survived will try to recalibrate. And teams that took gut-punch losses are heading into desperation mode, the kind where one more slip could erase everything they've built. Everything accelerates now. Coaches conceal tendencies, coordinators start leaning into matchup-specific game plans, and the stars who are built for winter football start dictating games on their own terms. It's all lining up for one of the most consequential stretches of the season, and as always, I'll be breaking down every matchup, every adjustment, and every edge all week long. Let's get into the games! The Falcons, now 4-9 and officially eliminated from playoff contention, enter Week 15 after an outright unraveling in their 37-9 loss to the Seahawks in Week 14, a game that slipped away from the opening play. At the beginning of the second half, Rashid Shaheed housed a 100-yard kickoff return, immediately putting Atlanta on its heels before the offense even touched the field. And things only worsened as Sam Darnold repeatedly picked apart a defense that looked slower every drive, throwing 3 second-half touchdown passes, 2 to Jackson Smith and Jigba on intermediate timing routes that exposed Atlanta's soft zone leverage, and 1 to Cooper Kupp after a busted coverage that left the sideline wide open, while the Falcons' own offense generated almost nothing outside of a few isolated chunk runs and short completions early in the second quarter before completely shutting down after halftime, only scoring a field goal in the final 30 minutes and turning the ball over 3 times in situations where they absolutely could not afford empty possessions. With top receivers injured or inactive, Atlanta had no vertical threat, no rhythm, and no ability to sustain drives, and the offensive line allowed repeated interior pressure that forced every drop back to collapse after the first read, making their 2024 inconsistency painfully clear yet again. Tampa Bay, meanwhile, sits at 7-6 after a frustrating 24-20 home loss to the Saints that felt like a self-inflicted setback from start to finish, with rain-soaked conditions magnifying every small error, as Baker Mayfield completed only 14 of 30 passes for 122 yards, 1 touchdown, and 1 interception, repeatedly missing open timing throws and failing to convert pivotal third downs, as the Bucs went just 3 of 13 in those situations. Although the run game offered scattered positives, Bucky Irving breaking a few solid runs and Sean Tucker muscling in their lone rushing score. Tampa's offense repeatedly stalled once it crossed midfield, producing drives that looked promising between the 20s but completely lost cohesion in the red zone and settled for punts or rushed throws that weren't there. Defensively, the Bucs were just as uneven, allowing Saints rookie quarterback Tyler Shuck to scramble for 2 touchdowns and pick up back-breaking third down conversions when Tampa's edge contain collapsed, and they gave up the deciding 13-yard rushing touchdown in the fourth quarter, thanks to poor gap discipline and missed tackles in the second level. Combine that with slippery ball issues, subpar field position, and coverage busts on crucial downs, and the Bucs never once felt in control despite being within 1 score for much of the final quarter. So now these two teams meet with both carrying heavy baggage, Atlanta reeling from a game where nothing clicked, and Tampa frustrated by how much they left on the field. And while both have glaring inconsistencies, Tampa Bay's overall Week 14 performance offered more sustained competence on both sides of the ball than Atlanta's collapse, leading me to take the Buccaneers to steady themselves at 8-6, while the Falcons fall to 4-10. The Ravens roll into Week 15 after a draining 27-22 loss to the Steelers that showcased both their potential and their inconsistency, as Lamar Jackson threw for 219 yards and added a rushing touchdown, but spent most of the afternoon navigating heavy pressure and narrowly missing several explosive plays, while Zay Flowers remained the offensive bright spot by torching Pittsburgh for 124 yards on a variety of crossers and sideline routes. Though Baltimore repeatedly failed to finish drives and saw what looked like a go-ahead touchdown to Isaiah Likely overturned on review, a moment that summarized a game filled with near misses, defensive breakdowns on 3rd and long, and an inability to stop Pittsburgh's downhill run-heavy approach. Meanwhile, the Bengals are coming off an even wilder 39-34 loss to Buffalo that highlighted both the brilliance and the volatility of their offense, with Joe Burrow firing for 284 yards and racking up 4 total touchdowns, while T. Higgins hauled in 2 scores and Jamar Chase consistently created separation underneath. Yet none of it was enough to overcome a defense that got carved up by Buffalo's short and intermediate passing attack, surrendered multiple long fourth-quarter touchdown drives, and delivered one of its worst moments of the season when a Cincinnati pass was jumped and returned 63 yards for a pick six that flipped the game's momentum. And even though the Bengals continued to move the ball late, their final 2 drives stalled out thanks to a combination of pressure, miscommunication, and aggressive coverage adjustments by Buffalo, raising questions about Cincinnati's ability to close out competitive games. So now, with Baltimore sitting at 6-7 needing to stabilize its playoff hopes, and the 4-9 Bengals trying to avoid sliding completely out of contention, this matchup becomes a test of which team can clean up the late-game errors, tighten its coverage, and finish drives. But given how the Ravens' overall structure, run game, and defensive baseline have looked steadier than Cincinnati's recent roller coaster outputs, I'm taking Baltimore to climb to 7-7, while the Bengals fall to 4-10. The Raiders head into this Week 15 showdown at 2-11 after a 24-17 loss to the Broncos, a game that spotlighted just how thin and dysfunctional their attack remains. Las Vegas gained only 229 total yards across 48 plays, while Denver ran 72 plays and controlled the ball for over 39 minutes. Their rush game sputtering for just 40 yards on 12 carries, and their third down conversion rate in that game a dismal 3 of 9, as the offensive line surrendered 4 sacks for 24 lost yards, and Geno Smith, before exiting with a shoulder injury, along with backup Kenny Pickett, could never build rhythm or give the team a chance to string drives together, leaving momentum limited to an early Smith to Brock Bowers touchdown, while the defense and special teams failed to compensate against a Broncos unit that executed relentlessly, converting third downs and racking up 27 first downs while dominating time of possession. On the other side, Philadelphia comes in at 8-5 after a turbulent but revealing 22-19 overtime loss to the Chargers, a game defined by a brutal turnover cascade from Jalen Hurts. 4 interceptions and a lost fumble, including that bizarre sequence where he was intercepted, fumbled the return, briefly recovered it, then lost it again. Yet even amid that chaos, the Eagles still piled up 365 total yards and flashed what remains a dangerous run-pass balance, thanks largely to Saquon Barkley's 122 rushing yards and a 52-yard fourth-quarter touchdown that briefly gave them the lead, while the defense logged multiple sacks and held Los Angeles to under 300 total yards, showing that when Philly plays disciplined, physical football, they still have the tools to compete at a high level. This matchup now pits a Raiders team whose offense is broken, unable to sustain drives, protect a quarterback, or establish a credible run game, against an Eagles squad that is explosively talented but haunted by self-inflicted mistakes. If Las Vegas can create a short field or force a turnover, they might hang around, but Philadelphia's upside is far greater if they clean up their ball security and lean on their physicality. I'm backing the Eagles to bounce back here hard, climb to 9-5, while the Raiders fall to 2-12. The Arizona Cardinals come into this matchup at 3-10 after a 45-17 loss to the Rams, a game that underscored their struggles on both sides of the ball and continued a season-long trend of inconsistent performance. Offensively, the Cardinals were largely one-dimensional, relying heavily on Michael Wilson, who led the team with 11 receptions for 142 yards and both of Arizona's touchdowns, as Jacoby Brissett struggled under constant pressure, completing 25 of 44 passes for 271 yards and a touchdown, but also threw a costly interception. The running game provided little relief, with Arizona managing only modest gains on the ground and failing to sustain drives, which forced the passing game into predictable situations and allowed the Rams to capitalize with big plays. On defense, the Cardinals surrendered 530 total yards, including 249 rushing yards, and allowed several explosive third-down conversions, highlighting their ongoing ability to get off the field and their secondary struggle to contain deep passes, resulting in multiple touchdowns and giving up a large advantage in field position. Meanwhile, the Houston Texans enter the matchup at 8-5 after a disciplined 20-10 win over the Chiefs, where C.J. Stroud orchestrated a controlled passing attack, throwing for 203 yards and a touchdown while protecting the football and minimizing mistakes. Rookie Woody Marks led the ground game with 68 rushing yards, giving Houston a balanced offensive attack that kept the Kansas City defense off balance, while the Texans' offensive line effectively neutralized pressure and created lanes in the run game. Houston's defense was the defining factor, pressuring Patrick Mahomes throughout, generating 3 interceptions and limiting explosive plays, particularly in the red zone, which forced the Chiefs to settle for a short yardage score and a field goal and allowed Houston to dictate the tempo. The contrast between Arizona's turnover-prone, inconsistent offense and a Texans team executing efficiently on both sides of the ball is stark, and with Houston showing both discipline and momentum, they are well positioned to capitalize against a Cardinals team still searching for consistency and rhythm. Considering Arizona's ongoing issues stopping the run and generating offense beyond Michael Wilson, I'm picking the Texans to improve to 9-5 while the Cardinals drop to 3-11. The Chargers roll into Arrowhead at 9-4 after surviving a chaotic 22-19 overtime thriller against the Eagles, a game that tested every ounce of their composure as they overcame 3 turnovers of their own, while capitalizing on 5 takeaways from a Philadelphia offense that never found stability. And even with Justin Herbert still limited physically, he delivered the big throws when it mattered, throwing 12 of 26 for 139 yards and a touchdown as well as an interception, and supplemented the offense with 66 tough rushing yards while the defense repeatedly bailed Los Angeles out, highlighted by Tony Jefferson's walk-off interception following Cameron Dicker's 54-yard overtime field goal that capped a performance showcasing the Chargers' ability to win ugly. Kansas City enters at 6-7 after a deflating 20-10 loss to the Texans where the offense never clicked, with Patrick Mahomes held to 160 passing yards and forced into 3 interceptions behind an offensive line that struggled to control the line of scrimmage, leaving drives to crumble in critical moments and putting even more pressure on a defense that actually played well enough to keep them in striking distance until late. Still, the Chiefs' defense held Houston under 300 total yards and gave their offense multiple chances, and that competitive backbone is often what keeps Kansas City afloat when the offense sputters. Now the Chiefs stay at Arrowhead with their season teetering, their margin for error gone, and the sense that if a turnaround is going to happen, this is the moment. an energy that tends to bring out sharper execution, cleaner football, and a level of urgency this team historically channels when pushed to the brink. The Chargers have the record advantage in momentum, but Kansas City plays its best football when the lights get hot and the narrative tilts against them. And that's why I see the Chiefs grinding out a response win to move to 7-7, while the Chargers fall to 9-5 as Kansas City tries to mount the kind of late season run that once looked improbable, but suddenly feels just within reach if they can get this one. Buffalo rolls into this Week 15 showdown after a dramatic 39-34 comeback win over the Cincinnati Bengals in Week 14, a game that showcased why the Bills remain deadly when the pressure's on. Josh Allen threw for 251 yards and 3 touchdowns and added a 40-yard rushing score as part of a 78-yard ground output, and the defense flipped the game late with back-to-back takeaways. Cornerback Christian Benford returned an interception 63 yards for the go-ahead touchdown, and defensive end A.J. Epinesa picked off Joe Burrow on the very next drive, setting up a quick score. But the victory also exposed lingering weaknesses. Buffalo surrendered multiple chunk plays and long drives, and their late-game survival depended on big defensive plays rather than consistent dominance, raising questions about whether they can sustain this level of execution. New England, meanwhile, enters at 11-2 after a Week 14 bye, and fresh off a convincing 33-15 rout of the New York Giants, where signal caller Drake May delivered a clean 24 of 31 for 282 yards and 2 touchdowns with no interceptions. The run game contributed 119 yards behind Travion Henderson and Ramondre Stevenson. Tight end Hunter Henry paced the passing game with 73 yards, and the defense throttled New York's attack, forcing negative plays and limiting big gains all game, while also scoring on a 94-yard punt return by Marcus Jones. The contrast heading into Week 15 is striking. Buffalo brings opportunistic firepower and momentum under pressure, but remains vulnerable defensively and inconsistent in sustaining drives, while New England appears balanced and disciplined on both sides of the ball with fewer glaring flaws, especially after the bye. Given the Patriots' recent consistency, healthier offensive line play, and ability to control tempo, I'm backing New England to win and climb to 12-2, while Buffalo drops to 9-5. The Jets enter Week 15 at 3-10, officially eliminated from playoff contention, coming off a 34-10 home loss to the Dolphins in Week 14 that highlighted both their offensive inconsistencies and defensive breakdowns. Rookie quarterback Brady Cook struggled to get into rhythm, completing 14 of 30 passes for 163 yards with 2 interceptions, while the offensive line allowed 6 sacks and failed to open significant running lanes, limiting Breece Hall to just 43 yards on 14 carries. The receiving corps struggled to make plays, with rookie Mason Taylor totaling only 5 receptions for 51 yards, and the team converted just 1 of 12 third downs, killing momentum and forcing short drives. On the defensive side, the Jets allowed Miami to control the clock and dominate the line of scrimmage, giving up 239 rushing yards, including a 107-yard, 1-touchdown effort from Jalen Wright, and struggled to generate pressure or create turnovers, allowing the Dolphins to string together multiple sustained drives that wore down New York's secondary. Meanwhile, the Jaguars enter at 9-4 after a 36-19 home win over the Colts in Week 14, led by a balanced offensive attack. Trevor Lawrence completed 17 of 30 passes for 244 yards and 2 touchdowns, spreading the ball to Brian Thomas Jr., who had 87 yards, and Jacoby Myers, who added a key touchdown reception on a short yardage route. Travis Etienne carried the ball 20 times for 74 yards and 2 touchdowns, complementing the passing game and keeping the Colts defense off balance. Jacksonville's defense applied consistent pressure on Jonathan Taylor, limiting the star running back to 74 yards, forced a turnover early in the game, and recorded a sack for safety late, while the Colts struggled to sustain any meaningful drives against the disciplined front seven. Special teams also played a role, with Jacksonville pinning the Colts deep on multiple punts and converting a long field goal, further tilting field position. Considering the Jets' ongoing offensive struggles, inability to stop the run, and their failures on third downs against a strong, confident Jacksonville squad, that has shown balance and efficiency on both sides of the ball, I'm predicting the Jaguars improve to 10-4, while the Jets fall to 3-11. The Commanders enter Week 15 at 3-10 and officially eliminated from playoff contention after a brutal 31-0 shutout loss to the Vikings, in which absolutely nothing worked offensively. They finished with only 206 total yards, 12 first downs, and a miserable 3-for-10 mark on third down, with Jaden Daniels completing just 9 of 20 passes for 78 yards and an interception before leaving with an elbow injury, while Marcus Mariota stepped in and immediately threw a pick and later lost a fumble as Washington's receivers struggled to win matchups and the offensive line repeatedly collapsed, allowing Minnesota's front to dictate every snap. The ground game was no relief either, combining for only 107 yards behind a run-blocking unit that was consistently knocked backward. And defensively, Washington surrendered a demoralizing 98-yard, 19-play touchdown drive that chewed more than 12 minutes off the clock, highlighted by J.J. McCarthy hitting key throws and Jordan Mason punching in a score, while the Commanders failed to generate pressure, allowed over 150 rushing yards, and couldn't create any takeaways to flip momentum. The Giants, now 2-11, come off their 33-15 loss to New England in Week 13, a game where they were outplayed early and never truly recovered after giving up 17 first-quarter points, including the back-breaking 94-yard punt return touchdown by Marcus Jones that immediately put them in a hole. Jackson Dart, returning from concussion protocol, was efficient but limited, finishing 17 of 24 for 139 yards and a touchdown, while mostly operating in the short and intermediate areas because the offensive line struggled to keep the pocket stable. Devin Singletary provided their best spark with 12 carries for 68 yards and a fourth-quarter touchdown, but New York still mustered only 239 total yards and went 4 for 11 on third down, a familiar theme in their 7-game losing streak. Defensively, the Giants were consistently on their heels as the Patriots moved the ball for 395 total yards, hit several explosive passes, and controlled possession, while New York's pass rush rarely forced Drake May off his spot. As they prepare for the Commanders, New York will need its few positives: Dart's poise under pressure, Singletary's toughness, and Slayton's ability to track the ball downfield. But defending long returns and limiting explosive plays on third and long will have to be their top priority. With both teams entering Week 15 in severe offensive slumps and both defenses susceptible to extended drives, this matchup likely comes down to which side avoids killer turnovers and which offense can at least establish a functional run game. But even with Washington's injuries and their elimination from the playoffs, they still have more explosiveness at receiver. A quarterback duo threat, even on a bad day, can stress a defense more than what the Giants have shown, and a defense that, despite playing poorly against Minnesota, has flashed more disruption this season than New York's unit. So I'm taking Washington to grind out an ugly, low-scoring win and move to 4-10, while the Giants drop to 2-12. Cleveland rolls into this game at 3-10, officially eliminated from playoff contention after a gut-wrenching 31-29 loss to the Tennessee Titans, where rookie quarterback Shedeur Sanders delivered a monster performance. He completed 23 of 42 passes for 364 yards and 3 touchdowns, added a 7-yard rushing touchdown, and drove the Browns to 2 fourth-quarter scores to pull within 2, including a 7-yard touchdown pass to rookie tight end Harold Fannin Jr. with just over a minute left. But the team faltered when it mattered most, failing on both 2-point conversion attempts and letting a late Titans field goal stand as the margin of defeat. The Browns' offense otherwise showed fire. Receivers like Jerry Jeudy flashed. The passing game hit big plays downfield, and Sanders kept his poise under pressure. Yet defensively, Cleveland's run defense and pass coverage wilted, as Titans running back Tony Pollard gashed them for 161 yards on the ground with 2 long touchdown runs, including a 65-yard burst, and momentum-shifting turnovers and special teams miscues, including a blocked punt, helped Tennessee build a lead that Cleveland's offense nearly erased but couldn't overcome. On the Bears' side, Chicago enters this week at 9-4 after a tough 28-21 loss to the Green Bay Packers where their offense sputtered early. Caleb Williams threw for just 32 yards in the first half and the run game yielded little, but showed signs of a second-half resurgence by mixing in more balance and mounting a late comeback. They scored 2 touchdowns to tie the game 21-21 in the fourth and threatened to win, but a final red zone interception ended the bid. That collapse exposed persistent issues in pass protection and consistency through 4 quarters. Yet the Bears' ability to stay alive deep into a divisional battle shows resilience and fight. Against a Browns team that can produce explosive offensive outputs but remains vulnerable defensively, especially against the run, Chicago's improving rhythm and more stable defensive identity gives them an edge. I'm leaning Bears to win this one and climb to 10-4, while Cleveland falls to 3-11. Carolina heads into Week 15 at 7-6 after a bye week, coming off a dramatic 31-28 upset of the Rams, in which quarterback Bryce Young was sharp under pressure, completing 15 of 20 passes for 206 yards and 3 touchdowns. 2 of those TDs coming on critical 4th down conversions, including a go-ahead 43-yard strike to rookie Teteroa McMillan with just over 6 minutes remaining, while the Panthers' running game stayed consistently effective, piling up 164 yards on 40 carries and allowing them to control the clock and the tempo late in the game. Carolina's defense was opportunistic, forcing 3 turnovers, including a 48-yard pick six and a strip sack recovered deep in Rams territory, and held Los Angeles to 1 red zone score despite 379 total yards, showing that the Panthers can bend without breaking and make plays when it counts. Meanwhile, New Orleans comes in at 3-10 after a resilient 24-20 win over the Buccaneers, where rookie quarterback Tyler Shuck managed the offense efficiently, going 13 of 20 for 144 yards and supplementing that with 58 rushing yards and 2 touchdown runs, a 34-yard keeper to open the second half, and a 13-yard scramble late to seal the lead, while the Saints defense made several crucial stops, intercepting a key pass and holding Tampa Bay to 3 of 13 on third downs despite yielding over 300 total yards, demonstrating that they can compete with more talented teams when they execute in bursts. This matchup will test Carolina's ability to sustain both the run and pass against a defense that is opportunistic and well coached, while the Saints will rely on Shuck's mobility and timely defensive plays to keep the game close, though their overall offensive consistency and depth remain concerns. Considering the Panthers' balanced attack, ability to convert in key situations, and a defense that thrives on forcing turnovers in critical moments, I'm giving Carolina the edge this week, predicting they move to 8-6, while New Orleans falls to 3-11. The Lions come in at 8-5 after beating the Cowboys 44-30 in a game defined by offensive balance and timely defensive disruption, as Jahmyr Gibbs stole the show with 3 rushing touchdowns and 77 receiving yards. Jared Goff passed for 309 yards and a touchdown while distributing the ball confidently. Amon-Ra St. Brown continued his trademark consistency underneath and over the middle, and the defense fueled the victory with 3 sacks from Al-Quadin Mohammed, 2 takeaways, a forced fumble, and several key red zone stands that prevented Dallas from keeping pace late. Meanwhile, the Rams enter Week 15 at 10-3 after dismantling the Cardinals 45-17 in a performance that showed just how complete and well-rounded they can be, with Matthew Stafford delivering 281 yards and 3 touchdowns while operating with total command. The run game hammering Arizona for 212 yards thanks to Blake Corum's 128 yards and 2 scores, along with Kyren Williams' 84 yards and another touchdown, and Puka Nacua exploding for 167 yards and 2 TDs as the offense repeatedly generated long, methodical drives that kept the Cardinals on their heels all afternoon, while the defense swarmed to the ball, held Arizona to 51 rushing yards, consistently collapsed the pocket, and prevented any kind of sustained rhythm, making it one of the Rams' most dominant wire-to-wire wins of the season. This sets up a matchup between a Rams team whose offense looks efficient at every level and whose defense is tackling at a high rate versus a Lions team that can absolutely trade punches but still shows defensive volatility. And while Detroit's ceiling is high when Gibbs and Goff are both rolling, the Rams' blend of explosive passing, physical rushing, and disciplined defense gives them the more reliable profile right now. So with both teams fighting for playoff seeding and looking capable of pushing into double-digit wins, I'll take the Rams to move to 11-3, while the Lions fall to 8-6 in a hard-fought, high-intensity matchup that could carry major NFC implications. The Colts enter Week 15 at 8-5 after a 36-19 loss to the Jaguars in Week 14, a game that exposed both offensive and defensive vulnerabilities. Starting quarterback Daniel Jones left early with an Achilles injury, forcing Riley Leonard into action.
Unit lost.
Leonard completed 18 of 29 passes for 145 yards and an interception, while Indianapolis struggled to sustain drives and converted just 6 third downs out of 11 attempts. Jonathan Taylor provided some spark on the ground with a 74-yard rushing effort, but the Colts still totaled only 285 yards, and turnovers proved costly as 2 interceptions and a fumble set up Jacksonville's scores that put the game out of reach. Defensively, Indianapolis had no answer for Travis Etienne, who rushed for 74 yards and 2 touchdowns, while the Colts allowed 2 additional passing touchdowns and 350 total yards, highlighting ongoing struggles against explosive offenses. Meanwhile, the Seahawks are rolling at 10-3 following a 37-9 victory over the Falcons in Week 14, with Sam Darnold completing 20 of 30 passes for 249 yards and 3 touchdowns, all coming in the second half, while Jackson Smith and Jigba emerged as a key target, hauling in 2 of those scoring strikes. Seattle's rushing attack contributed 129 yards on the ground, keeping defenses off balance, and special teams added a 100-yard kickoff return touchdown by Rashid Shaheed. The Seahawks defense also stood out, forcing 3 turnovers and limiting Atlanta to just 9 points and 274 total yards, demonstrating dominance in both pass rush and coverage. Entering this matchup, the contrast between the teams is stark. The Colts are dealing with quarterback uncertainty, a leaky run defense, and overall inconsistency, while the Seahawks display balance, explosiveness, and depth on both sides of the ball. Seattle's ability to control tempo, converting critical situations, and generate big plays gives them a clear edge. I'm picking the Seahawks to improve to 11-3, while the Colts drop to 8-6.
They're actually citing Philip Rivers. Philip Rivers. The dude's 44 and coaching high school. Dude, let him coach. Oh, he can throw a football still. Oh, our coaches are so incompetent. Oh, he gave us a playoff berth in 2020. Let's sign him to the practice squad. Oh, Colts never change.
Green Bay enters this matchup at 9-3-1 after a hard-fought 28-21 win over the Chicago Bears, where Jordan Love looked fully in command of the offense, completing 17 of 25 passes for 234 yards and 3 touchdowns, showing excellent pocket composure on a deep shot to Christian Watson early, and later finding Bo Melton on a beautifully timed route that split the safeties, while the run game provided enough balance with Josh Jacobs grinding out tough yards before powering in the go-ahead touchdown on a bruising fourth-quarter carry. And the Packers' defense came through with the defining moment of the afternoon when Keyshawn Nixon undercut a slant in the end zone for a game-winning interception that preserved the victory. On the Denver side, the Broncos climbed to 11-2 by beating the Las Vegas Raiders 24-17, extending their win streak to 10 games behind a disciplined offensive approach led by Bo Nix, who completed 31 of 38 passes for 212 yards and punched in a rushing touchdown on a red zone keeper, while R.J. Harvey continued to emerge with 75 yards on the ground and a physical short yardage touchdown that capped a drive lasting nearly 8 minutes. And Denver once again dominated situational football by holding the ball for more than 18 minutes longer than Las Vegas. while Marvin Mims Jr. delivered the turning point with a 48-yard punt return touchdown that completely changed the energy of the game, supported by a defense that tightened up in the fourth quarter and forced the Raiders into 2 consecutive empty possessions when the game was still within reach. Stylistically, Green Bay has found success with explosive scoring bursts and timely defensive plays, but Denver's recent run has been defined by sustainability, control, and a complete 3-phase identity where the offense stays on schedule, the defense closes games, and special teams consistently create momentum-shifting plays. And given that combination along with the confidence that comes from stacking so many wins together, I am taking the Broncos to win and move to 12-2, while the Packers fall to 9-4-1. The Titans enter this matchup at 2-11 after a narrow 31-29 win against the Browns, a game that showcased both their potential and ongoing struggles. Running back Tony Pollard carried the offensive load, rushing for 161 yards and 2 touchdowns, providing the spark that kept Tennessee in striking distance throughout, while rookie quarterback Cam Ward completed 14 of 28 passes for 117 yards and 2 scores, though he also threw an interception and faced pressure from a Browns front that sacked him twice. Wide receivers Chamari DK and Van Jefferson contributed key receptions on critical drives, but the passing game remains inconsistent and the offensive line protection will need to improve against the 49ers' defensive front. On the defensive side, Tennessee bent but didn't break, forcing 2 failed 2-point conversions and holding the Browns to field goals on several late drives, though Cleveland still managed 364 passing yards and 3 touchdowns, exposing the Titans' coverage vulnerabilities in the secondary. Meanwhile, the 49ers come in at 9-4, coming off a bye and a 26-8 win over Cleveland, where Brock Purdy was efficient, completing 16 of 29 passes for 168 yards and a touchdown while avoiding turnovers, and Christian McCaffrey and Brian Robinson combined for 79 rushing yards to keep the offense balanced and on schedule. Tight end George Kittle was instrumental on 3rd downs, and San Francisco's defense dominated the trenches, with Clelin Ferrell recording 2 sacks and the unit forcing short fields through consistent pressure and defensive disruptions. The 49ers' combination of methodical offensive execution and aggressive defensive play creates a challenging matchup for the Titans, who will need near-perfect execution in both phases to compete. Considering the 49ers' balance and depth, along with Tennessee's ongoing pass protection issues and secondary weaknesses, I'm picking San Francisco to win, improving to 10-4, while Tennessee drops to 2-12. Minnesota enters Week 15 feeling as confident as they have all season after a dominant 31-0 shutout of the Commanders, a game where everything finally clicked on both sides of the ball, starting with J.J. McCarthy delivering his most composed performance yet, by completing 16 of 23 passes for 163 yards and 3 touchdowns with crisp ball placement, strong pocket discipline, and no turnovers, and Jordan Mason helping establish complete control of the tempo by grinding out tough yards between the tackles, while anchoring a monstrous 98-yard touchdown drive that drained more than 12 minutes off the clock and broke Washington's defensive will. The Vikings complemented that offensive rhythm with suffocating defense led by Harrison Smith and Andrew Van Ginkel generating 2 takeaways, a front 7 that allowed just 107 rushing yards, and steady pressure that limited Washington to only 10 first downs and 206 total yards, while never allowing a snap inside the red zone. Dallas, meanwhile, was trying to regroup after a 44-30 loss to the Lions, where Dak Prescott put up volume numbers with 376 passing yards, but also threw 2 momentum-killing interceptions, including one in the red zone, while the Cowboys' ground game sputtered behind inconsistent run blocking that left them facing long, down-and-distance situations throughout the second half. On defense, Dallas suffered one of its most undisciplined outings of the year by giving up 408 total yards, repeatedly allowing Amon-Ra St. Brown and Jahmyr Gibbs to break tackles in space, and missing tackles that extended multiple scoring drives while the pass rush failed to consistently affect Jared Goff. With the Vikings coming off their cleanest, most methodical win of the season, and Dallas still struggling with turnover issues, defensive lapses, and an identity crisis on the ground, I'm taking Minnesota to improve to 6-8 and hand the Cowboys another setback at 6-7-1. Miami heads into this game at 6-7 after a dominant 34-10 win over the Jets in Week 14. A victory built on a rushing attack that piled up 239 yards. Backup Jalen Wright stepped in when Devon Achane exited with a rib injury and delivered 107 yards and a touchdown, while rookie Ollie Gordon also found pay dirt. And quarterback Tua Tagovailoa managed the game efficiently in cold weather, completing 13 of 21 passes for 127 yards and a touchdown to Jalen Waddle on Miami's opening drive, setting the tone early before the Dolphins' defense and line took over. Miami also sacked Jets rookie quarterback Brady Cook 6 times, smothered New York's run game, and forced multiple turnovers which kept the pressure on all afternoon. On the other side, Pittsburgh brings in a 7-6 record after a gritty 27-22 win over the Baltimore Ravens, a game where veteran signal caller Aaron Rodgers threw for 284 yards, delivered a touchdown pass, and even added a rushing score, while deep threat DK Metcalf torched coverage for 148 receiving yards and helped Pittsburgh establish a vertical attack that forced Baltimore to defend downfield all game. The Steelers' defense bent but stood firm when it mattered, containing Lamar Jackson late, forcing a crucial sack that ended Baltimore's final drive, and clamping down on Ravens receivers when the Ravens tried to rally. This matchup now pits a Dolphins team riding momentum and thriving on their ground and physical identity against the Steelers squad that's rediscovered its explosiveness in the passing game and can spin the ball deep while also mixing in control via the run and timely defense. Given Miami's running strength and ability to control tempo, especially if they keep the ball on the ground and protect Tua, they look dangerous on the road. But Pittsburgh's renewed shot creation ability through Rodgers and Metcalf, combined with their knack for tightening up defensively late in games, gives them the edge in a close one. I'm projecting the Steelers to win and move to 8-6, while the Dolphins drop to 6-8. As we wrap up this week's slate, the playoff picture is finally taking shape, and after Week 14, both conferences feel like they're tightening all at once. Starting in the AFC, the biggest storyline is Denver sitting right on the doorstep of clinching a playoff berth. The path is simple on paper. Just win against the Packers and you're in. And even if they stumble, the universe is practically bending over backwards to get the Broncos into January football. A tie paired with a Chargers loss could punch their ticket, and even some of the other AFC contenders slipping. Jacksonville, Houston, or Indianapolis could help shove Denver across the finish line. The wildest scenario is the one where Houston and Indy both drop their games as long as neither ends in a tie, and somehow that mathematical chaos still results in Denver celebrating. It's one of those weeks where the Broncos don't just control their destiny. Destiny is basically controlling them. Then there's New England, who suddenly finds itself in position to lock up the AFC East, which felt unthinkable at mid-season. A win takes care of the division immediately, but even if they don't get that result, the Patriots have a handful of escape hatches to slide into the postseason. A tie combined with a Chargers loss works, but so does help from Houston, Indy, or Jacksonville slipping up. And like Denver, New England benefits from that same strange double-loss scenario involving Houston and Indy. As long as neither of those games ends in a tie, the Patriots could stumble into the postseason even without a full win. It's been a season of survival for them, and the AFC standings really show how tight the margins are right now from seed 1 all the way to 7. In the NFC, things are a little cleaner at the top, where the Rams have the most straightforward scenario of any contender this week. Just win. That's it. No scoreboard watching, no rooting interests, no need to pull up a probability chart. Los Angeles has played its way into a position where one more strong performance locks them into the tournament. And given the way the NFC standings are shaping up, with teams in the middle of the pack beating each other up and no true runaway wildcard emerging, this is exactly the moment the Rams want. They're in control of their lane while everyone else is dodging traffic cones. Across both conferences, the standings after Week 14 feel like the first real snapshot of who's built for a late-season push and who's about to fade. Some teams are clinging to life, hoping for that last bit of chaos, while others can seal their fate this weekend. And with 3 weeks left after this, the playoff race is about to hit that point where every game feels like a season in miniature. The kind of pressure that's going to define who's still playing when the calendar turns to January.